In high school, there's always that sort of time at the very end of the semester where the teacher has essentially completely finished all the curriculum, you've taken all your final tests, and all you are doing is inevitably waiting for the start of summer break. Despite there really being nothing to do, all the students still come regardless. I always tended to enjoy those times the most, where school became less of a place to go and do work, and more of a time to simply hang around and talk to your friends. On a lot of those summer eves, I personally would simply end up watching anime to pass the time anyway. While I was watching one of those anime, I heard a bit of commotion coming from some of the desks in front of me. I looked up and saw a small crowd near the desk of a friend of mine. Curious, I turned off my phone and made my way down towards them. Looking over the miniature crowd, I stared down at the school laptop he had open on his desk. After a long, awkward moment, I asked, What are you doing?" My friend replied, "I'm doing the sand simulator fight, of course." "The what?" I couldn't help but exclaim. By this point, I had become rather well affiliated with Undertale. It was hard not to at the time, but it was that moment that I had begun to really understand just exactly how popular it was. Playing on the tiny Chromebook in the classroom was a faithfully recreated one-to-one simulacrum of what was essentially the hardest fight in the game. As the tiny heart that represented the player character jumped about the screen, not a single pixel was out of place. Not a single attack was misrepresented. I had multiple questions that I didn't vocalize. For what reason was it playing on a Chromebook past the school's firewall? How many times had he been playing this fight to get this good at it? And how had him simply playing this attracted a crowd, even as tiny as this? This tiny summer day had been my first real major interaction with Undertale, and it was from here on that those interactions seemed to continue. Sometimes I would see a scene play here or there, or maybe my friends would be talking about their playthrough, or I would simply see the hundreds of posts by the large and very ravenous Undertale community. To say it was a cultural phenomenon would be an understatement, and at some point I had not even played the game, and yet somehow I had seen such a huge chunk of the game's story and gameplay purely through secondhand accounts. It had become the gaming media darling, and its meteoric rise and success would hardly fade over the years, even as a sort of spiritual sequel to Undertale, Deltarune, began to slowly release in an episodic format. Still, despite all that, I had never even played the game once myself. I mean, why would I? I had essentially seen all there was to see of the game, so there was hardly any point in playing. If anything, I was much more interested in Deltarune, as it featured a lot more of the things I personally liked in an RPG. It wouldn't be until almost 10 years later that I would finally end up playing it and Deltarune. And through that experience, I had got to see firsthand, with my own eyes, why exactly people consider it to be the modern classic that it is. The best way one can describe Undertale, and subsequently its sequel, is that they are a passion project through and through. The vast majority of the game, and I mean the majority, is done by the hands of one man, Toby Fox. It is a game that almost entirely reflects its creator's passions, humor, and life in one neatly fitted package. The game itself started as a Kickstarter, and distinctly one that was going to carry the torch of the Earthbound series. But as you begin to play, you begin to understand it's a lot more than simply a derivative piece. Indeed, within it lies a lot of unique concepts and gameplay ideas that could never be done by an Earthbound game, even though it wears those influences on its heart-shaped sleeve. Passages and dialogue are packed to the brim with a sort of character that's hard to find anywhere else, with a prose and quality to it that instantly lets the reader know this couldn't have been written by anyone else but Toby Fox. In a lot of ways, Toby Fox reminds me a lot of the sort of preeminent auteurs that have been popularized in the modern gaming sphere, but whereas they might take a director's role that is extremely hands-on, Toby instead takes the place of an author who is crafting every last piece of his creation with his own hands. While it is certain that Toby is not perfect, and he certainly has specific aspects of creation that he's better in, each of those touches are used meticulously in such a way that it crafts an experience that you simply cannot get with a bigger team of people. Amongst bigger teams, that singular vision is shared with all of your team members and employees, and with it, interpretations on how certain elements' implementations are formed. These sorts of creative differences only begin to multiply with the more people employed there. For many of them, this can be a good thing, as those creatives can sometimes go too far and begin to lose the appeal that they have in the first place, or sometimes they might even alienate the audiences they had. This is not to say that a bigger team is bad, but through Toby Fox's unique style of dictatorial creation, he preserves a kind of style and character that is unique to him and cannot be recreated even if someone wanted to. And, through that process, Toby Fox lays his entire soul bare to the player. From the beginning to the end, you are learning about a person, one singular person, in the things he finds cool, the things that he hates, and the things that he finds funny. And I think it is in this aspect that Undertale and later Deltarune soar. With that said, though, playing Undertale, it is very easy to tell it's a prototype, so to speak. At a base level, Undertale is an incredibly simple game. It lacks any real form of a skill tree or ability progression, and fights lack the sort of turn economy you might expect from other traditional turn-based games. You're not really managing turns, and you're not really managing resources, and you're not really acquiring new skills or abilities either. So where is the game's core gameplay lies? In essence, each battle plays out in what can only be described as a sort of puzzle. Through dialogue, the enemy gives you hints, and then discern which of the options in the act menu are the solution. After that, you simply dodge the enemy's attack in a bullet hell style dodging minigame until the enemy is thoroughly pacified. In this way, while many other games have a large gameplay focus on dealing damage and attacking the enemy, Undertale turns it on its head and instead has the main gameplay element be defending against the enemy, or more accurately, dodging their attacks. From the outside in, it's very easy to think, dodging? That's it? Isn't that kind of boring? And while for some fights that can be true, the bullet patterns and storytelling told through those bullet patterns keep enemies feeling fresh, and no one set of enemies is encountered enough that they overstay their welcome. In addition, Toby Fox manages to continually shake up this rather simple gameplay system, having the player dodge bullets in an increasing number of different fashions that fights can be quite hectic and frenetic as you switch between jumping over obstacles to weaving through them and shielding yourself from them. There's a lot of clever design here, taking very simple concepts and expanding on them in this way, and I applaud how much he was able to accomplish this. Still, though, despite that amount of cleverness, Undertale itself still can feel like it's rather bare bones from a gameplay angle. Truthfully, much of the game itself is carried heavily by two aspects: Toby's writing and his incredible music. Every single moment in the game is filled with characters quipping and talking, delivering jokes at 100 miles per hour and absolutely oozing charm. But one cannot help but feel as if it's there to distract you from the rather simplistic story and the very simplistic gameplay. When backed up by his incredible music, adding just that extra bit of personality to the characters and scenario, it becomes nearly impossible to really notice unless you're hitting the most downtime of downtime moments in the game's short runtime. But even then, you would hardly have time to notice it. And indeed, it perhaps speaks to his skill in these aspects that it can carry the game so thoroughly, suspending it on the thread of bone jokes, anime references, and an unending torrent of weebisms. In the end, all of that comes off as endearing, and even endlessly entertaining and funny. And what's not to love about that? You don't really see them that often, but Toby Fox's games are almost as much of a comedy as they are a JRPG. And while playing through, I can't remember a single session where I wasn't belly laughing at some point in his incredibly humorous and witty jokes. Those kinds of constant jokes are a lot harder to find in gaming than you would think, and it takes a very certain kind of person, especially to weave them into not just that dialogue, but the gameplay itself. That alone is noteworthy, because I think that for a lot of game developers, they aren't really using the gaming medium as a whole to its full potential. There's this distinct separation of gameplay and story, and this can feel like almost a waste at times. It's in this department in particular that I feel the touch of a visionary, someone who has such indisputable dictatorial control over a project can really flex some of those. It's a sort of trend that you can only catch in games that have a director's name posted around the front cover. Whether it be Kojima, Yoko Taro, or Toby Fox himself, these are the kinds of individuals that I can't help but think are trying to push games. In that sense, perhaps it's also why, like many of those other game directors, Toby Fox has gained such a wide cult following. You can only really see how far he truly can take it when he gets not only the funding, but the experience under his belt. In many ways, Deltarune itself not only improves upon, but adds onto the Undertale formula in ways that are almost innovating the innovations that Toby put forward in Undertale. With an extended team and budget, the game looks better, plays better, and tackles far more bigger story and plot points that simply wouldn't have been possible in Undertale's much more confined scope. When I had finished Undertale properly, I had a list of different complaints, and nearly all of them had been more or less addressed by the second game, which, in a lot of ways, I couldn't help but be surprised. You would think that after a game like Undertale, which is universally praised as being one of the best games of all time, many others wouldn't really want to change it up that much. But perhaps that constant strive for improvement is also one of the traits that he has, and I cannot help but state that Deltarune is a better game for it in almost every way. There's a sort of confidence and stride to Deltarune from a conceptual level. Everything feels as if it's given much more room to breathe and relax, to ponder and simmer. At times, perhaps Undertale can feel like it was constantly trying to entertain the player, like it was never content to give its characters more time to develop outside simple comedy bits and scenes. Indeed, in Deltarune, nearly every main character is given a satisfying arc and character progression, especially those of the main party and surrounding cast members. It's a kind of satisfaction that you just couldn't really expect in his first title, as concerned as it was, in many ways, with sort of creating his own style first and foremost, over really pushing the extent of what he has as an author. While I was apprehensive about playing a game that wasn't finished yet, coming out in bits and pieces over the course of multiple years, I found that he was able to adeptly create a story that leveraged this format of development. Each chapter you do gains more budget, more experience, and elegantly weaves plot lines from one to the next. In a lot of ways, it reminds me of a much longer running series like Yakuza, or even the Trails of series, in which a similar progression can be seen over the years. Granted, of course, those games dwarf the length of Deltarune, but the fact that I can even compare them at all is due to those drastic upgrades to the game itself being rather telling. However, while certainly Deltarune itself is not a sequel in the literal sense, it most certainly is a sort of spiritual sequel, with many returning characters coming back into the game, as well as the large cast of new characters, each of which has their own amazing personalities and sort of mini storylines that you can keep up with. It's in these characters, too, that you can really see Toby's development as both a game dev and a writer, as much of the tone and expressions these characters take is distinctly different than how they might have been represented in Undertale. But in a lot of cases, they feel far more like distinct individuals, rather than simply being an entertaining or humorous character. There's some level of maturity there that might have been lacking in Undertale's original scope, and it extends far into the rest of the game's writing as well. It's ambition writ large, and it's something you might not see from practically anywhere else. Speaking of ambition, I feel as if I should mention it's not entirely even restricted to the game itself. Imagine my incredulity when I heard that Toby likes to extend his storytelling beyond the boundaries of the 640 by 480 pixels that line the screen. From little hints in the code of the game itself, to websites, to marketing gimmicks, and even characters' colors, Toby has a knack for leading fans by the nose in more and more experimental and radical styles of storytelling. Once again, it's a kind of ambition that is trying to utilize the medium as a whole to its full use, and leaving no stone unturned when it comes to keeping the player invested in his whole creation. And for that reason, I can't say that I've really seen or played anything quite like it, really. Sure, there are dozens of different games that the man himself has stated he's taken inspiration from, but it's just that, inspiration. What will he achieve by the end of Deltarune? I can't really say or tell. All I know is that somewhere along the way, these games will surely go down as a sort of modern classic, games that are going to be remembered and perhaps studied for how they shaped gaming as a whole going forward. And that's really not something I had ever expected to say going into it at first, but it's something I did feel the longer and longer I played it. I know that 20 years from now, many others and I will be looking back at the real impact these games have had, and it's for that feeling alone that I know that gaming, and Toby himself, has yet to reach their full potential.